Hi, today I want to talk about a BIGIP controller bug. So the bug is controller delete services and it recreates the virtuals during BIGIP controller pod restart. Say like for some scenario like your BIGIP controller pod crashed or scheduled to upgrade or restart, and then all the virtuals on the BIGIP during the restart process, all the virtuals on the BIGIP will be removed and recreated. Especially when you have, say, more than 70 virtual servers deployed on the BIGIP. So I'll show you how this problem occurred. So let's go to the code. Remember when BIGIP has when the controller has write the configuration to the config.json file, and this is where the controller actually write the configuration to the config.json file. And it under two conditions. This condition, when the processed items greater than the queue length, or this condition if it's in initial state. So what it means? So actually this means, this condition means it's when the controller started or restarted, it will check this condition, and then if this condition is true, then write the file configuration to the config.json. So this condition is for the controller pod restart or start. So this condition is for when your controller pod is already running, and then you either updated your configuration in the cluster, or you removed or you added new configuration in your cluster. So this condition will be true to update the configuration and write it to the config.json file. So this bug is actually caused by this condition, because when the pod restart or start, it will wipe out all the virtual configuration on the BIGIP. So why that? Then we have to look into the problem is this app manager queue length, this counter is not set properly during the controller pod start. Why? Okay, so let's see where this queue length get set. Let's go back here. So let's see where it's get set. So it's in the app manager.go file. We have this function, process next virtual server, which is to process a virtual queue. So remember, as you know, all the virtuals is put in this VSQ, which is worker queue, which is a client go work queue. So each time we get a virtual, and then we process it. So see this condition, This is where the queue names get set initially when the initial state is false, and when the process the virtual is 0, like we have not started to process the virtual, so then set the initial virtual server queue length to the queue length. So this is where it goes wrong, because this length is not because if we look at which function caused this process next to virtual server, and let's see which function caused this process next virtual. So this is the virtual function, virtual server worker function to call this function and loop forever. And then let's see which function calls this virtual server worker. Which is here the virtual server. Here the virtual server worker gets started, and this is in the function run implement function, and so this run implement is start. This is called by the controller main function to start all the process. For example, this is to start the namespace informer on particular namespace, and this function is to start all the app informer functions, and this is where the virtual server queue get filled. And if we go here and so okay, let's in queue config. So if we look at it here, yeah, let's not go there. It's maybe a little too much. So we just you know, yeah. So let's go back to this function, and so you just need to know this within this function. That's where the virtual server queue. That's all the virtual servers get added in the virtual server queue, and this is the function virtual server worker. That's the function to process the virtual server queue one by one, and then so, but it's invoked by a Go routine, and so that's where the problem is, because ideally for sequential programming, and usually we would like finish this, then start to run this, right? So that's for sequential coding. But in Go, since this is a Go routine, and the Go scheduler can actually run this function before this function. So as you see, that's the problem, right? Because this is where the virtual server queue going to be filled, and this is where the function going to process the virtual server queue. So if this happens before this, and your the virtual server queue may not get all filled with all the configurations when the controller pod started, and then so that's why when that's why when it's okay, let in the output config, yeah. So again, so like here, this is in the when this is a condition for the when the controller pod started, and then see if this length is smaller than the actual virtual server number of virtual servers, and this condition will become true, and it will start to call the output config function, which is to write the config.json file, and then in this output config.json file, it calls output config locked, and output config locked is in the beginning. I show you the condition here. Is the condition here this? So when this queue length number is small than the actual virtual server numbers, and it will prematurely write the config.json file, and then when the Python F5 agent, the Python writer driver compare the config.json file to the virtuals that is already on the BIGIP, it sees, oh, there is actually there is a like smaller number of virtuals on the cluster and than the virtual servers on the BIGIP. So it will remove all those. That is not existed in the config.json file on the BIGIP. So yeah, and so how can you tell you are having this problem? Is when your controller pod started, and if you see a log line here, this is the number of virtual servers. If the number of virtual server is smaller than your actual virtual server numbers in your cluster, say if you have 140 virtual servers in your cluster or services, Kubernetes services in your cluster, you want the controller to deploy, but then you see when the controller started, then if you see a log like show a smaller number than actual virtual server number, then you are hitting that problem, and so this problem is intermittent. It's depend on your cluster environment and the number of virtual servers or Kubernetes services you in your cluster. So yeah, that's maybe next time I can show you a demo to make it clear.